On this channel you will regularly find analysis of the most ambiguous films that are quite unpopular among wide audience. Those films contain convoluted scripts, complex structure and unique director's ideas. The movie Sucker Punch fits this description perfectly. This is the most criticized film directed by Zack Snyder. It was the first movie in his career that was produced by himself and based on his original script. It attracted me by the fact that even 10 years after its release there are still theories that try to explain all the madness that happens in the film. Beyond any doubt the movie is open to interpretations, as the director has repeatedly stated himself, but this does not mean that there is no author's interpretation of this work. I'll show you exactly this author's version in the video. More than that, we will go even further. After analyzing the script, we will dig deep to find the hidden ideas of the film and understand what it really is about. As a result, you will see how the most of the film criticism disappears by itself. We have a lot of work ahead, so I would prefer to finish the introduction and get down to business. As you might have guessed, this analysis will contain spoilers. If you have not seen this film, go and do not come back until you watch it. If you have seen it but long ago, I still highly recommend you to refresh your memory to navigate fluently through the characters and the plot of the film. Only in this case you can fully enjoy this video. You have been warned. Sucker Punch is the most hated film directed by Zack Snyder. Its release turned into a complete failure. Critics hated it, the movie has barely met the budget. The audience reacted with no interest. Even the director's fans agree that this film is far from being the best Snyder has ever created. I have read and looked through a huge number of negative reviews of Sucker Punch. If we look at the major problems discussed in the reviews, we will get the following picture. The film is blamed for sexism, offensive portrayal of women in over-sexualized fetishistic outfits, uneven narrative, script chaos, an apt combination of different genres. Poor script, illogical and stupid, which falls apart at the slightest attempt to turn the brain on. Bright colors and high-quality visual effects are trying to hide flat and poorly written characters. The dialogues are full of cliches. Because of that, it is almost impossible to associate yourself with the characters and empathize with them. Sucker Punch frequently serves as an example of Snyder's failure in directing. The film is full of improper directing and character writing, unable to tell the story clearly, and overloaded with special effects, slow-mo and so on. As you can tell, almost everything is wrong with this film. At least nobody complains about the quality of music and visual effects. Is it even possible to respond reasonably to such a stack of criticism? Do we have another option than to take a closer look and try to understand what Zack has done so wrong with this movie? But instead of trying to provide counter-arguments, we will use a different route and look at the film from a different and obvious angle to which you don't pay attention during your first viewing. The angle that is missed by most critics and viewers. And who knows, maybe we will notice the aspects of the film that will nullify the flurry of criticism. But to achieve it, we will have to start from the very beginning. The film begins with an off-screen monologue about the guardian angel and the presentation of the stage to us.
Everyone has an angel, a guardian who watches over us.
One by one the curtains with the logos of the studio rise up, and behind the last one we see a young girl sitting on the bed. This is Baby Doll, the character that will accompany us through the whole film. If you watch Sucker Punch for the second time, you will recognize the storyteller's voice without any problem. This is Sweet Pea. Her story represents the beginning and the ending of the film, that gives the context to it. Everything on screen is what she tells us. The stage is framed by the image of an angel, implying that this is the girl Sweet Pea tells about in her monologue. At first we should mention that the director chooses a rather unusual style of presenting the main character. Why does he decide to start the film this certain way, with the wings and the stage? It is hard to say, so just remember this detail for some time, it will be useful to us. The camera rotates around Baby and the film shows us her background of getting to the mental hospital. The girl grew up with a cruel and violent stepfather. One rainy evening, the doctor declares the death of heroine's mother. This loss turned into real tragedy for her and her younger sister. The stepfather clearly wanted to inherit everything that past woman had, but he was disappointed. Given his violent reaction to the will and its contents, and quite young age of the wife, it is possible that it was him who had a hand in her death. The stepfather gets drunk and tries to take out his anger on the doll, but instantly gets a fight back. Then the younger sister becomes the target, and apparently it doesn't mean beating, but sexual assault. However, previously locked baby finds a way to get out of her room. She grabs a gun, trying to shoot her stepfather, but hits her sister. The shot was lethal. This tragic accident gives reason to the man to put baby in asylum. By giving bribe to a warden, he condemns the girl to a forced lobotomy. The doctor performing it arrives in 5 days. That's how much time is given to heroine to escape. Here in the clinic, baby for the first time makes eye contact with Sweet Pea, who's sitting on the stage and listening to the instructions of Dr. Gorsky. Further events of 5 days are shown to the viewer with a quickened pace until the very moment of the operation, and it seems like it will be performed right now. But then the scene abruptly cuts off, the narrative rhythm is broken. The environment instantly transforms. Grey and cold medical institution turns into an expressive and fashionable brothel. Warm colors, scenery with lots of details, a beautiful and an elegant stage. Aside from environmental changes, the characters are also different. The warden accompanying our heroine into the hospital has become a mobster, and everything in his appearance screams that he is a boss. Baby stands next to him. She was brought here not by her stepfather, but by a charmingly smiling rosy-cheeked priest. And Sweet Pea isn't sitting embarrassed on the stage anymore, but appears in the spotlight. Now we slow down. This might be key point of the film, and we are about to think carefully about everything that has happened. Without any exaggeration, the whole perception of the film depends on it. What has happened? Have we moved to alternative reality? Is this a fantasy? A dream? Why is the incident left unexplained by the director? It is difficult to take what is happening seriously when we don't understand what has occurred. The importance of that doubles when it comes to dramatic events and empathizing towards the characters. In the movie Inception, for instance, Christopher Nolan makes the rules of his cinematic universe as clear as possible before putting the viewer into a dream within a dream. However, to Zack Snyder, the reality in the movie is distorted simply at the snap of his fingers, and it doesn't seem that he intends to explain everything at all. From now on, borders of the film's reality is blurred. Further we go, it gets more difficult for the viewer to discern the truth from fiction. The misunderstanding of events in the particular scene create countless theories about everything that has happened. What else should the viewers do if the director didn't give them enough clues? Almost everyone agrees that the brothel is baby's fantasy. It was the way her brain somehow coped with the hopeless situation she happened to be in. There are other assumptions about that is just a reaction to the lobotomy or process of baby losing her personality, etc. But in the video I will show you a different interpretation, the most straightforward of them all. This interpretation won't involve making the script more complicated, but would rather make it as simple as possible. I want you to take everything in this scene as simple as it is. Consciously deny any interpretation without distorting what you will see ahead. Here are the first words and Sweet Pea's actions after transition to the reality of brothel.
Stop! Get that thing away from me. Get it away from me! And shut off that damn music! Undo these straps. Don't forget my ankles. Hurry!
Is there a problem, Sweet Pea?
This is a joke, right? Don't you get the point of this? It's to turn people on. I get the sexy little schoolgirl. I even get the helpless mental patient, right? That can be hot. But what is this? Lobotomized vegetable? How about something a little more commercial, for God's sakes?
And now what have we seen? The stage represents the room where our heroine went through lobotomies. All the details are there, the equipment, triangular window and the furniture. Although if you take a look you will notice that there aren't only a surgeon and nurses. Here is the priest from mother's funeral, doctors who gave baby doll an injection, a policeman with a flashlight. Right in front of us he crosses the stage, it's rather not to notice. And there is Sweet Pea, in the center of the whole show. She apparently plays a leading role in this show. But why is she dressed like Baby Doll? After all, Sweet Pea is wearing Baby Doll's wig with ponytails. If you take it literally, the movie has just showed us that everything we had seen before was just a stage play performed by the girls or even their rehearsal. After all, it is the same scene as in the very beginning. It started the film and the story of Sweet Pea, and now it is being interrupted. Why? Well, let's give our storyteller a chance to explain the situation and listen to her again. Remember, we do not interpret anything. We take her words as they are.
Don't you get the point of this? It's to turn people on. I get the sexy little schoolgirl. I even get the helpless mental patient, right? That can be hot. But what is this? Lobotomized vegetable?
Sweet Pea didn't like the ending of the performance. It is too gloomy, and visitors of the brothel where the rehearsal actually takes place don't find the performance entertaining. Perhaps the last thing they want to see coming here is the lobotomy of pretty girl on the stage. It may even surprise you, but this is the only true interpretation of this scene. It is really important because it doesn't try to show something too complicated such as split personalities or something like that, but rather makes it as simple as possible. Once again, back to the beginning. It is where the director takes our hand and leads us to the curtain of the gorgeous stage. And as soon as it rises, the girls and Sweet Pea will start their story. This is the key to the whole movie. All the events concerning Baby in the asylum are not just a story told by Sweet Pea, she's showing it. Moreover, the place demonstrated on stage seems rather particular. Visitors come there with certain expectations and even requirements. Then, Sweet Pea, telling the story of her guardian angel, is forced to deal with the request of her audience and tries to satisfy them. That's why we did not see a lobotomy. This film is not about the fantasy within the fantasy. We were deceived. Its true structure can be described as: the film starts with Baby's therapy, which takes place on stage of the asylum, all being not more than a performance in a brothel. This film is about the show within the show. At the very beginning, we simply skipped through all the scenes from the screen right up to the insides of Baby's therapy. For her, it is also a kind of performance on clinic's stage. The story of the girl goes through every layer, transforming in a certain way. Depends on which show we are looking at, being a part of an audience at a particular moment. Don't worry if the structure at this point seems bulky and confusing. Eventually during the video we will go over it more than once and you will realize its simplicity. The concept is way easier to explain using specific examples and transitions. Now I suggest looking from a slightly different side of the movie and ask yourself, why would the director make all these complicated constructions? Why can't you just go and tell Baby's story, especially when there are no fantasies or other realities in it? Why should the film introduce stages, brothels and these crazy worlds, making everything so complicated? The thing is that Baby's story is impossible to tell otherwise. It's not adaptable to a modern cinema. Therefore, Snyder has to find a way to transfer it to the viewer by getting a series of filters and artificially covering some events with others. And the brothel is the first filter. This is not Baby's fantasy or the result of avoiding reality using her brain. It's neither a mass hallucination, nor the consequence of a hammer breaking the ice. A brothel is a deliberate distortion of the story made to satisfy our needs and expectations. Brothel was created especially for us artificially. This is our fantasy. Now we will go a little deeper into what's been said and you will fully understand the director's idea. As soon as we can distinguish the logic of the hospital transformation into a brothel, the puzzle will come together. So what has happened inside the walls of the asylum? We know a little about it, as most of the film is happening in the brothel, although enough information is given to imagine what Baby had to face. Perhaps the most important thing is said by Blue.
So this is what we call a theater. Anyway, so the girls use this place to be social. Dr. Gorski, she uses it to help them deal with their issues.
All right, let's begin.
Polish therapy. It's really quite a show watching them act out who touch them or beat them or whatever. Dr. Gorski seems to think it helps them. I'm not so sure, but whether it does or doesn't won't matter much to you because once we take care of a little bit of business, there won't be any of that for this one. Good.
This is a strict institution where most of the staff are men. They have full control keeping the girls locked up. Until the first appointment for the lobotomy, Of course, if the risks are decently paid. Dr. Gorski is trying to help patients by applying so-called Polish therapy. Women have to go on the stage and try to recreate the traumatic events from their past, thus reliving these moments and getting rid of small part of the psychological pressure. This doesn't come easy for everyone. Patients need determination, calmness and even some acting skills. After all, the better they perform the past events, the more effective the therapy will be. The doctor helps them as much as possible, teach them how to relax and let go all the build-up pain.
You are safe. It's all safe. Now relax. And just let go.
Men of course do not mind watching this whole show. All these moans, screams and touching each other sometimes arouses them sexually, which consequently leads to a sexual violence. That fact is made clear by many hints along the film. We will talk about this later. What happens in a brothel? Basically the same thing. This is a place where men have absolute power over women, and in order to somehow make their fate easier, they are forced to come in the stage where everything depends on their determination, calmness and creativity. Both here and there, Gorski is supporting the girls, helping to overcome their fears and constraints. Although the set has changed, it is possible to draw more or less obvious parallels: kitchen, pantry, Gorski's room, and of course the stage. But there are certain differences, and they are more important for us if we want to make logic of the brothel fantasy more clear. Perhaps at first I will give 2 examples. Let's carefully observe the transformation of Gorski. She is a psychotherapist at the hospital and she is definitely interested in her patient's recovery. She is obviously on top of the hospital hierarchy for us as the viewers. After all, remember that catching Blue faking her signature, she immediately hands him over to the cops. But in a brothel, her status was significantly lowered. She turned into the same helpless hostage like all the other girls. Here Blue completely suppresses her will. Murders take place in a brothel, not in a hospital. The cook kills Rocket with a knife, Blue shoots Blondie and Amber. But in the hospital we were clearly shown that both the fat man and the warden continued to work as if nothing happened. Obviously there really was no murder, otherwise Blue would have gone to prison immediately, even before forging the documents. Using the example of these 2 points, it is apparent that the brothel turned out to be much tougher than reality. If this is a fantasy made by Baby's brain to escape from the hopelessness of psychiatric hospital, it wasn't well made. By the way, how did it happen that the fantasy starts with Baby appearing in the hospital, even before facing those challenges? In fact, this theory is too contrived and contradicts the facts shown in the film. Actually, the logic of transformation of the asylum into a brothel is entirely disparate. We continue to notice the differences between the layers. Characters were modified. Inner features became visible, the characters turned into exactly what people saw in them. In the hospital, Blue was a warden. He became the owner of the institution and didn't keep a secret that he is a mobster. That is how his retinue saw him: authoritarian, greedy for profit and considering girls his toys.
What do you think I want to do? I take care of these girls. I look out for them. These are my girls. Tell them. Tell them!
The stepfather became a priest. Once again, that's what he looked like to people around him. Heartbroken husband at a funeral who lost his younger daughter and almost was shot by the elder daughter, who was few steps from going mad. Poor innocent sheep in the eyes of the police. A clergyman in the world. All of the girls were turned into dancers and prostitutes. Why? This role was given to them in the hospital. They were just an entertainment and sexual objects for the men there. Everything becomes evident in the brothel. We will gradually shed light on the events of the original story by connecting different parts like that. For all we know, the most important thing: the Baby's story was drastically changed, and especially its ending. The lobotomy has led to Baby losing her virginity. Psychological freedom transforms into physical escape from a brothel. This is how Baby looked, gaining her freedom back in the hospital. Not having time to take her mind off after her mother's death, the heroine suffered more tragic loss. She killed her little sister with her own hands, the only loved one that was left in her life. And just at that moment, sitting in a closet and holding her blood-covered body in her arms, she becomes a prisoner. Even before crossing the doors of the asylum, Baby was suffering from guilt for a fatal mistake. She doesn't try to escape in the labyrinth of her mind from the horrors that are happening in the clinic. Why is that so? There isn't any hint for it in the film. Baby was introduced to us as a person capable of standing up for herself and people around her. Here, lying on a couch in a psychotherapist's office, it hurts not because of being in the asylum. She can't get out of that closet she was after she killed her sister. And Dr. Gorsky is aware of the heavy pressure of the girl's psychological trauma. All 5 days, Baby was in clear mind and understood what she was going to do. Deeply inside, all this time, Baby understood that she would remain a prisoner long after she gets out of the hospital. Baby has already lost everything that connected her to outside world. And this escape she started in reality, all for Sweet Pea's sake. For the sake of the person who still had relatives behind these walls, everything for her family. And Baby finds strength in herself and in the girls next to her to rescue Sweet Pea, making sacrifice in order to save her. That helped Baby to finally redeem her guilt and to gain psychological freedom. For Sweet Pea, paradise is real and happens to be in outside world. For Baby, there is no outside world. Her paradise is the ability to close her eyes once again and to see not the blood of her beloved sister on her arms, but the moment when Sweet Pea walks into the sunset to her family. Basically, this film tells us a simple story. On the first glance, it seems gloomy, overflowing with grief and violence. At the same time, the most beautiful and inspiring parts in it take place inside the mind of one young girl. Outside her escape plan is a sequence of primitive actions with several thefts. But at the same time, Baby is at constant fight with her own demons. Each time going to the stage in the asylum, Baby had to relive the events of that night repeatedly. Remember the disgusting faces of the stepfather and his attempt to take power over her sister. And of course, bear in mind that shot again. This story is flooded with aggression, fear and sexual references. It is not surprising that it ignited the imagination of all men who were watching the scene at that moment. To free herself from her pain, Baby should let go and face her fears, and at the same time turn her sexuality into a weapon. Turn it against those hungry eyes that are looking at the stage. And the climax of these events happens during her last dance in the kitchen in front of the cook. He used her sexuality behind the stage. It was a point of no return, when girls who lost their rights go and purposefully take them back. And the story would be sufficient except for one thing. It is not spectacular. It is uncompromising, cruel and overflowing with violence. Baby's internal transformation takes place on the stage, surrounded by aggressive, mad and horny guards. It all happens with tears, groans and chaotic movements, with an obvious possibility of being raped after all that happened. Well, at the end this madness ends with the girl undergoing a lobotomy. Now tell me, who are those psychopaths who can decide to go in the cinema to watch this movie? Do you understand where the problem lies? Snyder expects to promote Sucker Punch onto large screens, and at this very moment the need for brothel appears. The brothel improves the tone of the film. It makes the story brighter, clearer for the masses, more entertaining and dynamic. Completely eliminates the violence and age limit. The set is changed. More glamorous, golden and stylish costumes are added. There are no surprising and aggressive mentally ill people. In the cinema nowadays, girls aren't supposed to be shown like that. There are only brightly dressed ladies, fiery shows, dances and vocals. The stage that was filled with pain is transformed. Now there are only stunning and passionate performances. But you can't go too far. You need to feel the threat. Sexual violence is forbidden, but killing girls remains a possibility, maybe even by knocking their heads off the shoulders. Characters also need to be slightly modified. The original story lacks names and dialogues. Why should the viewer bother trying to understand the emotion of the actors? What if someone doesn't? Everything has to be apparent from the first view. The situation is different with Dr. Gorsky. In the brothel, she also becomes a slave and performs on stage with the rest of the girls. Why? For our pleasure. She is a good-looking woman with that sexual Polish accent. This should appeal to men in the cinema. At the same time, her relationship with Blue should be revised by adding a bunch of passionate kisses and light choking. Anyway, why don't make a whole performance including them? They look so good together. We can skip the cook, he's already charming enough. Now we go back to the story. It is too gloomy and incomprehensible for the modern viewer. Self-sacrifice, redemption, Lord, what is it about? Let our escape become more noticeable. If the heroine conscientiously agrees to a lobotomy in the asylum for the sake of inner liberation, then she loses her virginity with the sexy and the rich man for the sake of psychical freedom. Here, now it really sounds like happy end. Now do you understand what is the logic of a brothel? This is a fantasy made exclusively for us to like it. This is a deliberate simplification of the story and characters to suit the audience. Look what Snyder does. He tells a rather depressing story from an inspiring perspective, while creating something like a Trojan horse. Bright, colorful, spectacular. Without these features, the story had no chance of being shown to the public. And inside this narrative, besides the baby story, the director places something interesting. That is why the whole game started. Something that explains the title of this film. And we will definitely solve this mystery, but at first we need to pay a little attention to the baby's fantasies. In the brothel, at first our main characters is forced to dance at the rehearsal and then on stage in front of a male audience. But a viewer will never see the actual dance. Instead, we are thrown into surreal worlds, where Baby and then all the girls are destroying hordes of enemies, completing certain missions. You can find everyone here. There are orcs, 5-meter samurais, the dragon, cyborgs and fascist zombies with steaming mechanical bodies. All this bestiary is crashed to cheerful music, accompanied with colorful computer effects, plenty of slow-mo and explosions. Now we have to find some sense in everything what has just happened. Going in order from the very first fantasy. Madame Gorsky asked Baby to dance with the girls at the rehearsal. After a little motivating speech, the girl overcomes her shyness and begins moving to the beat of the music with her eyes closed. Surrounding changes and there is another stylistic break in the narrative. The girls transferred to another reality, feudal snow-covered Japan, where the temple comes in her sight. It is worth keeping in mind that Baby is clearly surprised by everything that is happening, looks around and decides to go inside. Apparently she does that in order to find out more about the place where she ended up being. Inside the temple, the girl meets a wise man and the following dialogue occurs between them.
Hello? Excuse me. Could you help me?
Shoes.
I'm sorry?
Your shoes. You're tracking snow everywhere.
Oh, I'm sorry. Should I take them off?
That time has passed. What can I do for you?
Nothing. I just...
Let me ask it another way. What are you looking for?
A way out, I guess.
You guess?
No, I know. I need to get out of here.
Freedom. That wasn't so hard, was it?
This is a rather weird encounter, and at the same time this is extremely important to us, because later we will look closer into it. The first thing that stands out is a blooper with the snow. The wise man accused Baby of bringing the snow to the temple on her shoes. We were clearly shown that this is far from being the truth. The floor behind her is perfectly clean. There is not a single snowflake on it. Why did they leave this mistake unfixed? This is a pretty serious error that can destroy logic in several parts of the script. The further we go, the more things occur. The girl looks back and does not see the snow, still asking for forgiveness. It is rather weird that she didn't confront the sage when she knew the floor was clean. She could have at least expressed her confusion to the whole situation. The conversation gets more awkward.
Oh, I'm sorry. Should I take them off?
That time has passed.
How many times have we heard from different sages that the main character needs to focus on the current moment, putting aside the past? These words could even be cut off the film, they have no sense at all. Afterwards, the sage tries to get Baby to answer why she is here, and after several unavailing attempts, he gives an answer by himself. It seems that for Baby, being here means to be free from this particular place, the temple, and from fantasy in general. The man gives the girl a goal in her journey, equips her, and with his last words encourages her to accept the battle. I didn't analyze the details of Baby first meeting this elderly man without a reason. It was made to understand the logic of these worlds during a short period of that was shown to us. Later we will see this character more than once in each of the fantasies, and we'll even see him as a bus driver in the final scene of the film. Let's go back to the connections between layers. As we remember, there was a focus on heroine in herself in the hospital. Her entire path to freedom was actually inside her head. In a brothel, history literally turned into escape. At the same time, everything that was going on inside the character's mind was put in front of everyone. Now mentally extend this logical chain and you will get a fantasy world. The logic of the brothel continues to work here. All personality that the girls had left was ripped out. Both Baby and their friends became completely empty, lost their goals and inner motivation. All this was amputated and embodied in the image of the old man. As if in a video game, the man explains to the girls where they were, why it happened and what they should do next. He gives the girls clear instructions and they will strictly follow them. It doesn't matter what they have to do, steal a bomb or cut the throat of helpless sleeping dragon baby. Here, none of them are able to neither argue nor show their inner man, because there is no inner man on this layer. This is shown through small things, such as baby's inability to object to the sage about the snow. The story in the asylum was about an internal transformation which wasn't shown externally. In fantasies, no inner change take place at all, while external progress is absolute. In the asylum, girls had to perform simple actions such as stealing a map, while the baby distracted the public on stage. Here, girls become a force that changed the course of prolonged war, and they are also responsible for saving a large city from destruction. The crazy world of fantasies is the opposite of the asylum. It is filled with actions, explosions, battles and glossy landscapes, while the inner world of the girls is devastated. Their differences among each other are shown only externally, in suits, hats, accessories, shoes and weapons, and so on. But in the asylum they were all the same, blending into the gloomy walls of the clinic, in the identical dirty clothes and with one depressive facial expression. The external and the internal replaced one another. While watching the crazy action, the viewer can feel the level of emotional tension between these girls when they were committing petty theft. There is another interesting thing. All characters in fantasies are no more than a collective image of a human, a set of clichés taken from various passions of modern youth. Here you can find a costume of Japanese schoolgirl from anime and armor which isn't supposed to defend from any attack. You can easily find references to comics, manga, tactical games and shooters in the style of Call of Duty. Worlds were rebuilt in the same manner. Basically all four fantasies are popular among geeks: feudal Japan, steampunk, fantasy and space opera. All of the fantasies function due to our intuitive reading of the patterns that lie in their basis. Here the orcs fight the knights simply because they have dealt with them their entire existence in hundreds of books, games and adaptations. The dragon is sleeping as it should and God forbid it is awakened by an invited guest. The wise man meditates in the temple by candlelight and whispers something under his breath about the living in the moment. He grumbles even without the reason, whether snow was brought into his temple or not, it does not matter. This is the first time we see this character in the film, but at the same time he is so familiar to us from other adaptations that we kind of know what to expect from him. These feelings happen everywhere. The main characters destroy the hordes of faceless creatures, rob the train and try to neutralize the bomb. Haven't we seen anything like this a dozen of times but separately? Fantasies of Sucker Punch are just a compilation of many elements from various sources. Indeed, in order to create something original you need emotions, imagination and creative thinking. But there couldn't be such thing. This is just a clumsy cluster of what has already been seen. And all this is sewn together with anything but comprehensible story. Pay attention to what the characters say. Conversations are only about something connected to external plot or clichés. There is not a single phrase, not a single action that would reveal the personalities of main heroes.
If you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. Don't ever write a check with your mouth you can't cash with your ass. You know, for those who fight for it, life has a flavor the sheltered will never know.
These and similar phrases are nice to hear here and there, but in fact they are obvious and make no sense at all. There is one more problem which gets this film criticized by everyone. All these fantasies are not organic and truthful for a person from the middle of the last century. And this is an honest note. I will say even more, even for a modern person this is clearly too much. Well, baby couldn't have fantasized all these technological innovations with interfaces and numerous references to modern computer games and anime. Everything that we see here is definitely fantasies, but they do not belong to baby. Being there, she does not understand where she is and what to do with it. These words are artificial point, injections in narration from the outside. Another layer of distorting the plot like a brothel. As a consequence, film structure seems even more complicated. Everything will form a logical picture if you keep one rule in mind. The beginning of any show in the film is an invitation for us to join watching it. Look how it works. At the very beginning, Sweet Pea starts her performance, which means we are in a luxury brothel watching it. Behind the curtains, the baby psychotherapy session starts on the stage of the asylum. Now she begins her show and together with the rotating platform, we are transported to the medical institution. We sit on the chairs and look at the stage with the mental patients and wardens. Baby relives the tragic events of that night when she killed her sister, and when we are finished watching her performance, we do not leave, but stay at this layer. After some time, Sweet Pea interrupts her show, pulling us out of the clinic, and we return to the brothel and sit down at its stage. And then after listening to the girls' comments, we get up and are getting familiar with this institution from the inside. The next invitation we get is from Baby, and again we see this rotation that take us. Stop, but where does it actually take us? Do we stay in the brothel? Definitely not. The audience is now staying and watching Babies dance, but we don't see it. The most interesting things happen here. With the appearance fantasy layer, another structure is added in the scene where we actually started watching this movie. In case we did it in the cinema, of course. Having bought a ticket, we went into the hall with certain expectations like visitor to the brothel. And as soon as all the seats were taken and the lights went off, the director of the film, Zack Snyder, started his show. The cinema is his stage, and he, like Sweet Pea in a brothel, tries to tell us a story, at the same time keeping in mind our requests. This way, while the audience of the mental hospital is looking at Baby's psychotherapy and the visitors of the brothel are watching an erotic dance, we are sitting in a cinema and enjoying the crazy action. Here the film begins revealing at its fullest. As you draw parallels between the three scenes, you will stumble upon a lot of insights. I will give some of the most important of them below. Remember, Baby entering the stage of the asylum is forced to perform a show that caused her psychological pain. She simply had no other choice. The audience, Dr. Gorsky and the walls of the medical institution made her act this way. Starting her story in the walls of a brothel, Sweet Pea is also limited by the desires of visitors to the brothel. She understands why people come here, and therefore she is forced to satisfy their needs. Snyder wants to tell Baby's story, but unfortunately the chosen place is restricting him. This makes the director go other ways, make one fantasy after another, ultimately turning everything into a theater of the absurd. And the funny thing is that this is exactly what the viewer needs for the most part. The flashy action that gave this film the green light to get on widescreens. It does not matter that the action value for the story itself and the development of characters is non-existent. Here, the inner content is non-essential. This film is not really about Baby's story, but about how it's being distorted and destroyed thanks to us. The director clearly shows what happens when he tries to satisfy everyone who influences the creation of the film. In this case, we risk getting a meaningless action with a bunch of cliches. And only in some exceptions this will be let us get a genuine story and unique characters. But even then, all these things will be unimportant. There is also another small problem. The days when men drooled at French maids and nurses are long gone. The modern public has different preferences. This is precisely the reason why Snyder, like Madame Gorsky, will force the girls to dress and act in a way that gives us pleasure, even despite their unwillingness to participate in this. Snyder knows why his films are loved. He knows his audience, their preferences. He doesn't only try to please them, but also consciously brings the situation to the point of it not making any sense, turning a layer of fantasies into an apparent provocation. Why do you think girls don't have names, but rather nicknames like in computer games? The protagonist usually has the name speaking for itself. Baby doll. In this film she really acts as a doll, on which men project their desires. In a brothel or cinema, there's minor difference. The director purposefully puts them on high heels, leather clothes, sexy tights and puts lollipops in their mouths. He uses an excessive amount of slow motion, thereby making us admire even more what is happening outside. The abundance of such effects, redundant stylization of the picture literally turn the characters into posters, emptying them from the inside. Here they are turned into icons of modern geek culture, the most pretentious outside but empty inside. These girls are no longer living people, they are puppets, mindless mannequins, forced to adapt to every modern cinema visitor's likings. That line when the audience is no longer able to sympathize the character is far behind. Snyder did everything and even more for us to have nothing left but to perceive what was happening on the screen as a show. The main thing is that we don't look deeper into the picture that we see on the screen, so we relax and just go with the flow. This is even sung in one of the songs during the fourth fantasy. This time the director doesn't try so much to hide this game from us. He openly encourages the viewers to admire the madness that is happening on the screen, ignoring the ability to think it through. Baby's dance hypnotizes brothel's visitors. Non-stop action, the frantic rhythm of narration, the overload of the frame with events and so on have a similar effect on modern cinema visitors. Now let's look at the end of the first fantasy. After Baby destroyed the last samurai, her dance ends and we again appear in the brothel. It was interesting that at the last break of the story Sweet Pea wasn't happy and gave an exhaustive comment on what happened. It's interesting to listen to her this time.
I've never seen Madame Gorski clap like that before.
Oh, get over it. It's nearly lights out.
She's not easily impressed.
She wasn't impressed. All that gyrating and moaning. The dance should be more than just titillation. Mine's personal. It says who I am.
Baby's dance has a powerful effect on men, but for Sweet Pea this is just twitching and moaning. Why? Let's see how their dances are fundamentally different. There is a musical number in the film where they let us know how the evening goes on the brothel stage. This is a sequence of dance numbers, each in its own style. Arabian Nights, peeping at French maids, nurses, and the highlight of the program, Sweet Pea in the image of Jeanne d'Arc, who was burned alive. This is different from what Baby demonstrated. She didn't tell the story with her dance, she just had these titillations. Sweet Pea, the star of this institution with all her skills, even enriching her speech with meaning, is unable to make such an impression on men, and it clearly worries her. After the first dance in the asylum, Baby discovered that she was able to control the attention of the guards and eventually began to consciously use her sexuality to increase the effect. But her psychotherapy is gyrating and moaning in the truest sense of the word. A similar situation is happening in a brothel. Baby knows perfectly well that her dance does not carry any meaning. For her, this is a conscious weapon to escape from this place.
The dance should be more than just titillation. Mine's personal. It says who I am. What the heck does yours say?
It says I'm gonna escape from here. That I'm gonna be free.
Well, send me a postcard from paradise.
It turns out that Snyder, creating crazy fantasies, is well aware that all this is free of any content. There is no longer his story, not a part of his presence. The director, like Sweet Pea, gives up and recognizes the bitter truth. To capture the attention of the modern public in the cinema, one needs not a unique story, not a piece of the author's soul in it, but only twitching and moaning. Or in this case, explosions, action and slow-mo. Director uses Baby to lure our attention. He turns his show into a weapon against us. Snyder uses it for one simple purpose: to free himself. And while the girls in the brothel are stealing things to escape, the audience sitting in the cinema misses the hit that they could not have expected coming to the movie. Sucker Punch is first of all a satire that makes fun of and criticizes its main target audience, the geek community. The film works in the best traditions of exploitation film industry. It lures a young spectator to the cinema with bright trailers and posters with pretty girls in miniskirts. They are the ones who, in combination with crazy action, sold this film. Coming to the cinema, people on one hand get what they want, and on the other, faced with criticism toward themselves. The same Sucker Punch. But what is it? If you have watched this film in the theaters, then it was enough for you, just to be distracted and look around for a moment. You would see exactly what Snyder tried to show. Satisfied visitors enjoying meaningless moves involving young appealing girls, while these girls dream to get free of them. Get rid of those who come to the cinema just for the sake of actions and a beautiful picture, twitching and moaning, as Sweet Pea said. Of those who create demand for films which represent girl with an ungrateful role, being just a delight for man. In the fantasy layer, Snyder gives the public what they desired, but at the same time deliberately deprives the heroines of any emotional content. And he does everything so that only a few people can notice the ploy. The main audience of the film is primarily young guys, geeks, and their hobbies usually include collecting comics and figurines. They love cosplay, entertaining movies with lots of fan service and references to the modern geek culture. This obsession with picture and not content is being openly mocked by the director. And at the same time, it is unwanted when the conversation comes to displaying women in films. Sucker Punch puts the viewer in awkward situation. It is extremely difficult to associate yourself with the characters. The rhythm of the story breaks periodically. There are no jokes at all. That is why it is hard to get involved in the story. In fact, only two opinions remain. Enjoy the visuals of the film, paying no attention to the content. Hate every move on the screen. Again, parallels with the brothel are lined up. Of course, there is a third option that is less common. When the viewer tries to solve the puzzle, filler evades him because everything around indicates that this is a picture about escaping from reality. This project is an honest trolling of critics, studios, the audience, and even fans. You can object to that, saying that many people didn't fall for the trick and blame Snyder for his fetish outfits. It even came to direct director insults. But this was only a provocation, one of the tricks that shifted the viewer's attention from content to the form of the picture. The public's reaction to this film is the same it was to the existence of brothels 60 years ago. Someone enjoys, the other criticizes with foam at the mouth for blasphemy. Moreover, no one even thinks of giving women the right to choose what to do or to accept any of her choice without judgment. Look at additional materials for the Sucker Punch and try to estimate the amount of work that the actresses had done on the set. Exhausting physical trainings, many tricks were performed without stuntmen, learning how to handle weapons and tactical interactions. Girls literally lived in the game and on the set, struggling all their free time with the consequences of overtraining. Do you think many of the critics appreciated them for their work? Everyone was busy being angry that Snyder was unable to show the woman's empowerment. Nothing remotely like this was even planned as a part of the show. The director showed that the difference between a modern cinema and the 60s brothel is significant when it comes to exploiting female characters. First of all, it comes to women's exploitation in production created for a young male audience. This applies not only to films, but also to anime, computer games, and so on. Concerning women's parts in Sucker Punch, Rocket speaks well during a tour of the brothel.
Blue owns the club, and we, my dear, are the main attractions. Ta-da! He brings in his clients, and we gotta make him feel, special.
Pretty girls need to make the movie sell better. No more, no less. First of all, a woman should be attractive, win her audience.
What is this? Lobotomized vegetable? How about something a little more commercial, for God's sakes?
Notice how Sweet Pea's words resemble typical criticism of Snyder films, right? He is constantly criticized for his too dark format of films, which are difficult for a wide audience to perceive. Sucker Punch was doomed to drown in criticism. If you are a man and make a film about women, then you instantly grab everyone's attention. You are obliged to praise the woman and nothing more. But what does Snyder do? He throws the main character into a situation where there is no way out at all. Baby is in conditions where she is forced to engage conscious sexual manipulation. That is judged by our society and which ultimately leads to voluntarily agreement to lobotomy, thus protecting herself from inevitable violence. And this is presented by the director as happy ending in a blockbuster with PG-13 rating. This trick is pure suicide. An additional problem is that the Sucker Punch is for the most part a director-driven film that only disguises itself as entertaining. This is not what we expect to see from a high-budget blockbuster. We are used to the fact that the director, using the tools and film language available to him, tells us a story and this way represents the idea. And the stronger the emotional response of the viewer, the more successful the film is. You are involved in the story, fascinated by the atmosphere and sympathize the characters. It means the film was a success. However, another approach can also lead to success. The viewer is involved in what is happening with the help of a crazy rhythm, non-stop action, an abundance of jokes, epic scenes and dynamic music. The film turns into a kind of emotional attraction, where the plot and the characters are set aside. Facing this approach, the viewer has to undergo a forced lobotomy, otherwise it is simply impossible to enjoy such a visual oversaturation. And Snyder forces us to do this in his fantasies. He consciously manipulates consciousness, focusing us on a bright outside. That's why there are shots, groovy soundtracks, surreal action games and sexy girls performing pirouettes with slow-mo. The epic picture with complete disregard of the internal quality. Here it is, the holy feature of modern Hollywood. This is successfully used by modern filmmakers, and much more often than it might seem at first glance. It's convenient. These tactics allow to send us on an hour-and-a-half journey into a world free from need to think without any effort. No need to bother with the quality of the script, reading out the characters, you can just take and reshoot old stories in a new way. The main thing is to add more gyrating and moaning. The breaking of the rhythm isn't allowed, neither is its sharp rises. Otherwise something unfixable may happen, the induced hypnosis will fail, and the viewer will begin to wonder what he's looking at. And this will make him angry, like a cook in Sucker Punch. Try to understand my point. You can enjoy the action in Sucker Punch or say in Transformers along with Fast and Furious. There is nothing wrong with coming to the cinema to relax. But it's important to be aware of what you are watching, to be able to conscientiously assess what has been seen to separate the looks from the content. From current examples, the entire Disney Star Wars trilogy can be cited. You can watch all these films and have fun, but it's important to realize that this is just a first-class wrapper with depressingly low-quality content. Let's get back to criticism of this film and discuss it a bit. As you know, almost all of it is broken up into one simple fact. Sucker Punch is a satire. Sexism, offensive portrayal of women in over-sexualized fetishistic outfits. Sometimes, in order to make an anti-war film, one has to show war. In the end, the context of what is shown is important, and it is precisely which a lot of critics ignore. I know that not all. Among them were those who not only praised the director for an excellent provocation, but also saw through his entire game. Boring and unprocessed characters, the torn rhythm of the story. All this is part of the story. This is the whole point. Show the process of degradation of the inner world of a characters in an attempt to tell an atypical story to the broad audience. As for the rhythm of the narrative, these breaks are made intentionally and put in script. This is one of the few markers that reveal the true essence of this film. Like the soundtrack with the voice of the main character, the presence of modern music in the 60s and so on. Weak script. If we consider the story in this film as baby's escape from reality, then there will be a lot of plot holes. But again, this is an imposed interpretation of the film, nothing more. If you watch this film as straightforward as possible, the script becomes very logical and many plot holes begin to dissolve. Therefore, I believe the version proposed in this video is the only true one. It explains all the facts and does not contradict any of them. The quintessence of Snyder directorial and professionalism. Such statements can be heard from those who are either very superficially familiar with the work of the director or simply unable to impartially analyze his filmography. I hope that this video will change your mind about the director and will allow a broader look at the work of Zack Snyder. Once again, Sucker Punch, it is director-driven film. Therefore, it doesn't have a goal to entertain anyone. This is the author's expression tool, where he is not bound by obligations and is free from any limits. If you think of it as a typical blockbuster, then this film will be one of the worst for many years. Sucker Punch is a deeply personal picture with a piece of its creator in it. One person was responsible for the idea and its execution. Not really one, but anyway. Watching it, you are submerged primarily not in the story and characters, but in the director's head, and you can try to understand the way he sees the world. In conclusion, I want to say the following. Unfortunately, in the modern cinema, a similar approach to a film as Snyder's can be seen less and less. It doesn't matter how you feel about Sucker Punch and Zack Snyder, but you still need to understand that real masterpieces only appear in one case, when the process is led by a passionate person and not by a group of people who think only about profit. Sucker Punch is a film addressed to us by the director and actors. They ask to get them free from those who turn the stage of the theater into the brothel with their requirements, desires and expectations. Always remember that it is us who buy tickets, thereby supporting and choosing what we want to see on the screen. We dress girls and are responsible for making hundreds of millions of dollars worth of empty movies. The keys to the handcuffs in which we put directors and actors are in our hands. We already have a map as well as weapon. We only should ignite the inner flame. After all, this film is not really about baby, but about me and you. Sweet Pea tells us about it once again in plain text.
And finally, this question. The mystery of whose story it will be. Of who draws the curtain. Who is it that chooses our steps in the dance? Who drives us mad? lashes us with whips and crowns us with victory when we survive the impossible. Who is it that does all these things? Who honors those we love with the very life we live? Who sends monsters to kill us, and at the same time sings that we'll never die? Who teaches us what's real, and how to laugh at lies? Who decides why we live and what we'll die to defend? Who chains us, and who holds the key that can set us free? It's you. You have all the weapons you need. Now fight.